day I signed away my garden, Gilbert knocked over my prized tomato plants. Not accidentally. I watched him do it with purpose, his polished loafers crushing the careful latticework I'd built over 3 seasons. The vines sprawled across the dirt like wounded soldiers, their unripe fruit scattered like casualties. "It's just dirt," he said, not even bothering to look me in the eye. "Sign the papers, Palmer, and we can all move on. I'm Palmer Elliott, and until 6 months ago I was married to Gilbert's son, Dorian. The garden plot had been my sanctuary during those final toxic months of our marriage, a small patch of earth tucked behind the Flores family estate, where I could breathe without someone telling me I was doing it wrong." "The papers are ready in the study," Esther called from the French doors, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We've even prepared a little tea." I looked down at my muddy gardening clogs, knowing they'd leave marks on their imported marble floors. Good. Inside, the study felt like a trap. Family photos lined the walls, carefully curated moments showing the perfect Flores dynasty. I noticed they'd already removed the ones with me in them. $3,000 is more than generous, Gilbert said, sliding the document across the mahogany desk. "Considering it's just a hobby garden? Just a hobby garden?" Like my 3 miscarriages had been just bad luck. Like my marriage had been just a phase Dorian needed to outgrow. "I have one condition," I said, pulling out the papers my lawyer Remington had prepared. "A buyback clause?" Esther laughed, the sound like breaking crystal. "Oh, darling, still playing at business?" "It's non-negotiable." I kept my voice steady, the way I'd practiced. "The clause stays or no deal." Gilbert barely glanced at the additional page. "Fine. Whatever makes you feel better about this. It's worthless land anyway. We're just tired of looking at your vegetable experiment from our breakfast room." I signed where indicated, my signature surprisingly steady. Esther poured tea into delicate cups, but I left mine untouched. "I suppose this is goodbye then," she said, already turning away. "Do try to find a more suitable hobby. Gardening never quite suited you." I walked out through the garden one last time. My shoulders felt lighter with each step, even as I passed the ruined tomato plants. Behind me, I could hear Gilbert already on the phone with his contractor, discussing patio designs. They thought they'd won. Rich people often mistake silence for surrender. What they didn't know, what they hadn't bothered to read in their arrogance, was that Clause 17B specified very particular conditions for repurchase, conditions involving city planning changes, conditions that Remington and I had crafted with surgical precision based on whispers about future transit developments that Gilbert, for all his connections, hadn't heard yet. I knelt down and scooped up a handful of soil, letting it filter through my fingers. $3,000 was nothing compared to what this land might be worth soon. But more importantly, it was nothing compared to the look on their faces when they realized what they had overlooked. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Bethany. "Did you do it?" "It's done," I typed back. "They didn't even read the fine print." Another message popped up, this one from Dorian. "Mum says you finally signed. Good. Maybe now you can move on and stop playing victim." I deleted his message without responding. Let them think I was walking away with less than I deserved. Let them believe I was the same pushover who'd endured their subtle cruelties for 8 years. I may have signed away my garden today, but I'd planted something else in its place. Seeds of revenge that would take root so quietly, so slowly, they'd never see them growing until it was too late. Standing at the property line one last time, I smiled at my ruined tomato plants. "Don't worry," I whispered. "We're playing the long game now." "You're either brilliant or crazy," Remington said, spreading city planning documents across his desk. Maybe both. 3 weeks had passed since I'd signed away my garden, and I was sitting in my old college friend's law office, surrounded by zoning maps and municipal codes. "The light rail expansion is just a rumour right now," he continued. "But if it happens—" He traced a line across the map with his finger, stopping exactly where my former garden plot sat. "When it happens," I corrected, "Gilbert's not the only one with connections." Remington leaned back in his chair. "And you're sure they didn't read Clause 17B carefully?" They barely glanced at it. Esther was too busy planning where to put her new outdoor kitchen. My phone buzzed. Another Instagram notification. The Flores family was hosting their first garden party of the season. The photos showed elegant tables arranged on fresh concrete, where my tomatoes used to grow. "They're really rubbing it in, aren't they?" Remington said, peering at my screen. "Every chance they get." I showed him another photo, Gilbert raising a toast, the caption reading, "Finally cleared out the eyesore. Welcome to our new entertainment space." "You know," Remington said carefully, "this kind of long-game revenge can consume you. Are you sure it's worth it?" Before I could answer, my sister Bethany burst into the office, waving a newspaper. "Emergency council meeting next Tuesday," she announced. "They're discussing transit development zones." As a real estate agent, Bethany had her ear to the ground about city planning. She'd been my secret source from the beginning. "Any mention of the South Corridor?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Nothing specific, but..." She pointed to a quote from a council member about utilising existing property lines for minimal displacement. Remington whistled low. "That's exactly what we were counting on." I spent the next week attending every community meeting I could find, sitting quietly in the back, taking notes. At one session, I spotted Leo Mitchell from the planning department. He looked tired, probably from dealing with all the wealthy homeowners trying to protect their property values. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Dorian. "Mum's new garden party series is a huge hit. Shame you never understood the importance of proper entertaining." I clicked through the photos he'd attached. Esther holding court in a flowing caftan. Gilbert showing off his new grill station. The perfectly manicured space that had once been my sanctuary. "Still obsessing?" Bethany asked, finding me staring at my phone during our weekly coffee meetup. "Just keeping informed," I said. But we both knew it was more than that. Every smug photo, every pointed caption was fuel for what was coming. "The council's making their preliminary announcement next month," she said, sliding a paper across the table. "Look at the proposed station locations." My hands shook slightly as I read. There it was, in black and white, a transit hub requiring access through what was now the Flores' new entertainment space. "Palmer?" Bethany waved her hand in front of my face. "You okay?" I nodded, folding the paper carefully. Just thinking about karma. That evening, I drove past the Flores estate. Another party was in full swing, lanterns glowing where my grape arbor used to be. As I watched, Gilbert emerged onto his new patio, champagne in hand. My phone lit up with a text from Remington. "Documents are ready. Say the word." I thought about all the times Esther had commented on my common background at family dinners, about Gilbert's dismissive sneer whenever I spoke at family meetings, about Dorian's constant gaslighting, making me question my own worth. "Not yet," I typed back. "Let them enjoy their parties a little longer." I drove home to my small apartment, where I'd started a container garden on the balcony. The tomatoes weren't as big as they used to be, but they were mine. And unlike the Flores family, I knew that the sweetest harvests take time. Looking out at the city lights, I smiled. The council announcement was coming, and with it, everything would change. Sometimes revenge doesn't need to shout. It just needs to wait for the right moment to bloom. The community centre buzzed with nervous energy as Leo Mitchell stepped up to the podium. I sat in the back row, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. "The City Council has approved Phase 1 of the light rail expansion," Leo announced, clicking through his presentation. "The South Corridor will include 3 major transit hubs." A map appeared on the screen. There it was, the red dot marking the future station, right where my garden used to be, right where Gilbert's precious new patio now stood. "This is outrageous," a voice cut through the murmurs. Esther had arrived, fashionably late as always. "That's a residential area." "The city has identified the most cost-effective and least disruptive routes," Leo explained patiently. "We'll be reaching out to affected property owners individually." I kept my face carefully neutral as Esther's eyes swept the room, probably looking for allies. She didn't even notice me. "My husband is on the board of..." she began, but Leo cut her off politely. "All decisions are final, Mrs. Flores. The environmental impact studies are complete. and the funding has been secured. After the meeting, I lingered in the parking lot, pretending to check my phone. Right on cue, Leo emerged, looking exhausted. "Rough crowd," I said sympathetically. He laughed. "You have no idea? I've got a brunch meeting tomorrow with some property owners who think their connections can change the plans." "The Flores family?" I asked innocently. "Yeah, though between you and me, they're in for a surprise. That access point is non-negotiable. It's the only feasible route that won't require demolishing actual homes." My phone buzzed. "Bethany. Did you see Esther's face? Priceless." I was about to reply when another voice cut through the evening air. "Palmer, what are you doing here?" Dorian stood a few feet away, looking as polished as ever in his consulting firm suit. "Don't tell me you're trying to cause problems for my family again." "Just staying informed about my community," I said, matching his cold tone. "You know, like a concerned citizen." "Right," he scoffed, "because you've always cared so much about civic duty. This wouldn't have anything to do with that ridiculous buyback clause you insisted on?" Leo glanced between us, curious. "Buyback clause?" "Nothing important," I said quickly. "Just some old property business." Dorian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Whatever you're planning, it won't work. Dad's already making calls. That station will never happen." I smiled, thinking of the carefully worded clause 17B. "We'll see." Later that night, Remington called. "Bethany told me about the meeting. It's time, Palmer. We need to file the paperwork before they figure it out." "Not yet," I said, watching the sunset from my balcony. "Let them have their brunch first. Let them think they can stop this." "You're enjoying this a little too much," he warned. Maybe I was, but after years of being made to feel small, of being told I didn't belong in their world, of watching them destroy my garden out of pure spite, maybe I'd earned this moment. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. It was Paris, a local journalist Bethany had introduced me to. "Hearing rumours about resistance to the transit hub. Any comment on how this affects local gardening initiatives?" "No comment," I typed back. "Yet." The next morning, I drove past the Flores estate again. Cars lined the street, their power brunch in full swing. Through the windows, I could see Gilbert holding court, probably promising Leo the moon to change the transit plans. What they didn't know was that I'd already met with the city's historical society about my garden's contribution to local food initiatives. What they couldn't guess was that I had documentation of every community event I'd hosted there, every school group that had learned about sustainable growing practices in that worthless plot of land. My phone buzzed one last time. Remington again. "The paperwork is ready. Just say when." I watched as Leo left the brunch, shaking his head as he walked to his car. Gilbert and Esther stood in the doorway, their faces tight with frustration. "When?" I typed back. "Sometimes karma needs a little help, and sometimes it arrives right on schedule, like a train pulling into the station." The construction crew arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, their yellow tape and orange cones a stark contrast against the Flores manicured lawn. I watched from across the street as Gilbert stormed out in his monogrammed robe. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, waving a piece of paper. "This is a stop work order for my patio." The foreman shrugged. "City orders, sir. Properties under review for the transit project. All construction has to halt until ownership verification is complete." "Ownership? I own this property." Gilbert's face was turning an interesting shade of purple. "Actually," I said, stepping forward with Remington beside me, documents in hand, "that would be me." The silence that followed was absolutely worth every second of waiting. "What did you say?" Esther appeared in the doorway, still in her silk pajamas. Remington cleared his throat professionally. "According to Clause 17B of the Property Transfer Agreement, which you signed 6 months ago, Ms. Elliott retains the right to repurchase the land under specific zoning circumstances that have now been met." Gilbert snatched the papers from Remington's hands. "This is absurd! This is fraud!" "No," I said calmly. "This is karma." Leo Mitchell chose that moment to arrive with 2 other city officials. "Good morning, everyone. I see you've received the notification." "Leo," Esther purred, switching tactics instantly. Surely we can discuss this reasonably. Over brunch, perhaps. I'm afraid not, Mrs. Flores. The city needs to negotiate directly with the legal owner of the access point property. He turned to me. Ms. Elliot, if you're ready. Gilbert's face went from purple to white. You planned this. All of it. No, I corrected him. I just planted the seeds. You did the rest when you destroyed my garden out of spite. Dorian will hear about this, Esther snapped, pulling out her phone. Oh, I'm counting on it. The city officials began their inspection, marking boundaries with stakes and flags. Each one drove into the ground like a tiny victory flag. Ms. Elliot, Leo said, consulting his tablet. We'll need to schedule a formal meeting to discuss acquisition terms. The city is prepared to make a very competitive offer. Gilbert's head snapped up. Offer? What offer? That would be between the city and the property owner, Remington said smoothly, which, as established, is my client. A sleek car pulled up, and Dorian jumped out, still in his gym clothes. What's going on? Mum's hysterical on the phone. Your ex-wife, Gilbert spat, has just revealed herself to be a conniving... Careful, Remington interrupted. Everything you say can be used in potential litigation. I walked over to my old garden space, now covered in expensive stonework. Kneeling down, I touched the ground where my tomatoes had once grown. You can't do this, Dorian said, following me. Palmer, be reasonable. This is my family's property. Not anymore. I stood up, brushing dust from my knees. You should have read the fine print. Isn't that what you always told me? To pay attention to the details? Paris, the journalist, appeared with a photographer. Ms. Elliot, would you comment on the historical significance of this community garden space and its role in the new transit development? Esther made a choking sound. Gilbert looked like he might explode. The garden, I said clearly, making sure they could all hear, was always about building community. Now it'll continue that mission in a new way. This isn't over, Gilbert threatened as I walked away. Actually, I called over my shoulder, it is. The city needs this access point. No amount of connections can change that. But hey, look on the bright side. It's just dirt, right? Later that evening, Bethany brought wine to my apartment. To clause 17B, she toasted, grinning. My phone was flooded with messages from Dorian's family members, ranging from threats to desperate negotiations. I deleted them all. You know they'll try to fight this, Bethany said. Let them. I watered my balcony tomatoes, which were finally starting to fruit. Everything's legal, everything's documented, and everything's exactly what they deserve. A final text came through from Leo. Meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. to discuss compensation. Bring your lawyer. I smiled, thinking of Gilbert's face when he realized what was coming. Some revenge is loud and dramatic, but the best kind, it grows slowly, takes root, and blooms exactly when it's supposed to. 3 miscarriages, Paris said, her recorder running on the coffee shop table between us. And your mother-in-law said what exactly? That maybe it was for the best, I replied, stirring my untouched tea. She said the Flores family needed children with stronger stock. Paris's pen paused over her notepad. And this was at your hospital bedside? Right after the 3rd loss, Esther brought designer pajamas instead of sympathy, said I should at least look presentable for the doctors. The journalist shook her head. And your husband? Dorian was at a business dinner. Couldn't miss it. His father would have been disappointed. As if summoned by memory, my phone lit up with Dorian's face. I declined the call, but a text followed immediately. You're talking to reporters now? Real classy, Palmer. Mum's devastated. Speaking of your ex, Paris said, nodding toward the window. Dorian was crossing the street, heading straight for the cafe. Perfect timing, as always. Palmer, he said, sliding uninvited into our booth. We need to talk. I'm in an interview, I replied calmly. An interview? He laughed bitterly. Is that what you call this hit piece you're planning? Paris raised an eyebrow. Mr. Flores, I'm doing a story on community gardens and urban development. Your ex-wife's project is a fascinating case study. Project? Dorian's voice rose. She manipulated my family, hid clauses in contracts, and now she's trying to destroy our reputation. Interesting perspective, Paris said, her recorder still running. Would you like to comment on your family's decision to destroy Ms. Elliott's award-winning community garden program? Dorian's face flushed. That was private property. Property obtained through documented harassment, I added quietly. Should we discuss the security cameras your father installed to monitor my gardening hours, or the time your mother called the police about my suspicious composting? You're twisting everything! Dorian slammed his hand on the table, making our cups rattle. Several cafe patrons turned to stare. Like you twisted things when you told everyone I was emotionally unstable after losing our babies? My voice remained steady. Or when you convinced me I was imagining lipstick stains on your collar. Paris was scribbling furiously now. This isn't about our marriage, Dorian hissed. No, I agreed. It's about karma. It's about consequences. It's about powerful people finally facing the results of their actions. Dad's lawyers will bury you. I pulled out my phone, showing him the email I'd received that morning. The city's offer just came in. Want to see how many zeros it has? His face went pale. You wouldn't. I already have. I stood up, gathering my things. The papers are signed. The deal is done. Your family's precious patio is going to become a transit hub, and there's nothing your father's connections can do about it. You've changed, he said, and for the first time I heard fear in his voice. No, I corrected him. I've grown. Like my tomatoes used to before your father knocked them over. Paris cleared her throat. Mr. Flores, would you like to provide an official statement about the property dispute? Dorian stood abruptly. This isn't over, Palmer. Actually, it is. But hey, tell your mother thanks for the designer pajamas. They were perfect for signing multi-million-dollar contracts with the city. After he stormed out, Paris turned off her recorder. That was intense. That was nothing, I said. You should have seen the hospital room scene, or the day I found out about his affair with his secretary while I was on bed rest. Why didn't you tell these stories sooner? I looked out the window, watching Dorian's expensive car pull away. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't telling your story. It's waiting until they write their own ending. My phone buzzed again. Remington this time. City planners want to name the station Community Garden Plaza in honor of the site's history. Interested? I smiled, thinking of Gilbert and Esther having to see that name every day from their breakfast room window. Very, I typed back. Paris gathered her notes. This story's going to make waves. Good, I said. It's about time something grew in that garden again, even if it's just the truth. The city planning office buzzed with tension as Leo spread the final contracts across the conference table. Gilbert and Esther sat on one side, their lawyer nervously adjusting his tie. I sat on the other with Remington, calm as a garden after rain. The city's final offer is $8.2 million, Leo announced. Gilbert's face contorted. That's impossible. This plot isn't worth... The strategic location makes it essential, Leo interrupted. As the legal owner, Ms. Elliott has first right of negotiation. Esther's perfectly manicured nails dug into the table. We owned that land first. And you sold it, Remington reminded her, sliding forward the original contract, with a very specific buyback clause that you signed. Which you hid in legal jargon, Gilbert's voice boomed through the room. Actually, I said, opening Paris's article on my tablet. I was very transparent about wanting the clause. There are witnesses who remember you saying, and I quote, "Fine, whatever makes you feel better about this, it's worthless land anyway." The door burst open and Dorian rushed in, waving his phone. Have you seen the news? It's everywhere. Paris's article had gone viral overnight. Garden of Justice, how one woman's peaceful protest bloomed into multi-million-dollar victory. The story detailed everything. The miscarriages, the gaslighting, the garden's community impact, and the karmic twist of the transit hub. This is character assassination, Esther hissed. No, I corrected her. This is journalism. Everything in that article is documented fact, including your hospital bedside comments about stronger stock. Leo cleared his throat. If we could return to the matter at hand... I want to sue for defamation, Gilbert interrupted. Remington smiled. Please do. We have security camera footage of you destroying Ms. Elliott's garden. Your cameras, by the way. The room fell silent except for the gentle hum of fluorescent lights. "The city needs an answer today," Leo said firmly. "The project timeline is tight." I picked up the pen, feeling its weight in my hand. 8.2 million seems fair? Wait! Esther's voice cracked. "We'll match it. We'll pay you whatever you want for the land." "That's not how this works," Leo explained. "The city has already allocated the funds. The transit hub will be built." "You planned this," Dorian accused, pointing at me. "All those community events in the garden, the school programs. You were building a case for historical significance." "No," I said, signing my name with a flourish. "I was building a community. You just never noticed because you were too busy looking down on it." Gilbert stood abruptly. "This isn't over." "Actually," Leo interjected, "with these signatures, it is. Construction begins next month." As if on cue, Paris appeared in the doorway with a photographer. "Ms. Elliott, could we get a photo for the follow-up story? Perhaps by the project renderings?" The large display board showed the future transit hub, complete with a community garden plaza and educational space. My name was listed prominently as both the property donor and historical consultant. "You've ruined everything," Esther whispered as the camera flashed. I thought of all the nights I'd cried in my garden, hiding from their cruelty, of the community members who'd found solace among my tomato vines, of the children who'd learned to grow their first vegetables in soil Gilbert had called worthless. "No," I said, gathering my papers. "I just planted something better." Outside, Bethany waited with champagne. "To karma!" "To justice," Remington added. My phone buzzed with a message from the city's historical society. "Community Garden Plaza Educational Program approved. Would you consider serving as advisory board chair?" I looked up at the Flores estate, where construction equipment was already arriving. Soon their peaceful morning coffees would be accompanied by the sound of progress, the rumble of machinery, the beeping of trucks backing up, the constant reminder that karma has perfect timing. "You know what the best part is?" Bethany asked, following my gaze. "What's that?" "They'll have to see your name on that plaza sign every single day." I smiled, thinking of Gilbert's precious patio being torn up, of Esther's garden parties disrupted by construction, of Dorian having to explain to his social circle how his ex-wife had outmaneuvered his entire family. "No," I said. "The best part is that something good will finally grow there again." The wrecking crew arrived at dawn. I watched from my folding chair across the street as they began dismantling Gilbert's precious patio, piece by expensive piece. The sound of breaking stone echoed like music through the morning air. "Coffee?" Bethany appeared beside me, holding 2 steaming cups. "Wouldn't miss this for the world," I said, accepting one. The Flores' front door flew open. Gilbert emerged in his robe again, but this time something was different. He looked smaller somehow, defeated. "Ms. Elliott?" A crew member approached with a clipboard. "We found something you might want to see." Beneath the patio stones, barely visible in the dirt, were the remnants of my tomato plants. The roots had survived, somehow, waiting all this time. "Should we preserve any of this?" the worker asked. Before I could answer, Dorian's car screeched to a halt at the curb. "Stop!" he shouted, waving a folder. "I have proof of misconduct." Remington materialized from his car, right on schedule. "Mr. Flores, we discussed this. Any harassment will result in immediate legal action." "It's not harassment," Dorian insisted. "I have evidence that Palmer knew about the transit plans before the sale. That's insider trading." "Wrong again," Remington said, pulling out his own folder. "We have documented proof that the information was publicly available at city council meetings. Your family simply didn't bother to attend them." A news van pulled up, Paris and her crew. "Ms. Elliott, could you comment on the historical preservation aspects of the transit hub design?" Esther appeared in the doorway, her usual poise cracking. "Historical preservation? It was a vegetable patch." "Actually," Leo said, walking up with a team of city officials, "it was the site of award-winning community education programs. The new design will incorporate elements of the original garden into the plaza's architecture." "This is what you wanted all along, isn't it?" Dorian demanded, stepping closer to me. "To humiliate us?" "No," I said quietly. "I wanted justice. The humiliation was just a bonus you brought on yourselves. A police car cruised by slowly, the same officer Esther had once called about my suspicious composting. He waved at me, smiling. "The contractors found these," the crew member said, holding up my old garden markers, somehow preserved under the patio. "The names are still visible. Heritage tomatoes, community herbs." Esther made a choke sound. "Those labels were hand-painted. I remember mocking them at your garden parties." "Yes," I said. "You did." Paris's camera crew captured everything. The excavation, the discovered garden artifacts, Gilbert's slumped shoulders as he watched his patio being carted away in pieces. My phone buzzed. A message from the city's education department. "Curriculum approved for Community Garden Plaza's youth program. Starting interviews for instructors next week." "You've destroyed our peace," Gilbert said, his voice lacking its usual thunder. "Like you destroyed my garden." I gestured to the construction site. "The difference is, something good will come from this destruction." Dorian stepped forward one last time. "Palmer, please. We can work something out, for old time's sake." I thought of those old times, the miscarriages, the gaslighting, the subtle cruelties wrapped in polite smiles. "No," I said, "we can't." The construction foreman called out, "Ms. Elliott, we're ready to break ground for the Plaza Foundation. Would you like to do the honours?" I walked past the florist family, past their broken patio and shattered pride, and climbed into the waiting excavator. Leo handed me a hard hat with Community Garden Plaza printed on it. "You don't know how to operate that," Esther said weakly. "Actually, I do. I got certified last month, just for today." The machine roared to life under my hands. As I manoeuvred the bucket toward the ground, I saw Paris's camera tracking every moment, Bethany filming on her phone, and the florist family watching their carefully manicured world crumble. The bucket bit into the earth, and I felt something inside me break free. Not the sharp satisfaction of revenge, but something deeper. The peace of knowing that sometimes justice grows in the most unexpected places. "Look," Bethany called out, "your tomato plants were right. They just needed time to break through." I smiled, watching the roots emerge from beneath the broken patio stones. Some things can't be buried, no matter how hard you try. The morning sun caught the steel and glass of the nearly completed transit hub, making it sparkle like morning dew. I stood in what would soon be the educational garden space, my hands deep in fresh soil as I planted the first seedling. A heritage tomato, of course. "Ready for the ceremony?" Bethany asked, adjusting the podium nearby. "Almost." I patted the soil around the plant, a descendant of my original garden survivors. "Just wanted to get this one in first." A familiar car pulled up to the curb. Dorian stepped out, looking older somehow, clutching an envelope. "You're not invited to the opening," Bethany said sharply. "I'm not staying," he replied. I needed to give you this." He held out the envelope. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Me in the garden during our marriage, teaching neighbourhood kids about composting, hosting community dinners among the tomato vines. "Found these in Mum's study," he said quietly. She kept them all. Never showed them to anyone, but she kept them. "Why are you giving me these?" "Because you were right, about everything." He looked around at the beautiful new space. "We destroyed something precious because we couldn't understand its worth." Before I could respond, Paris arrived with her camera crew. "Ms. Elliott, could we get some shots of you planting the first garden?" Dorian turned to leave, but paused. "The transit hub. It's beautiful. Better than that stupid patio ever was." "It's not about being better," I said. "It's about being right." He nodded and walked away, disappearing into the morning traffic. The opening ceremony gathered momentum around me. Community members arrived, many carrying plants from their own gardens, descendants of seedlings they had originally gotten from my old plot. "Look who's here," Bethany whispered. Gilbert and Esther stood at the edge of the crowd, looking uncomfortable but determined. Esther clutched a small pot with a familiar plant. "These grew from your tomatoes," she said, approaching cautiously. "They came up in our yard after everything. I thought they should come home." I accepted the pot, recognizing the distinctive leaves of my original heritage variety. "The garden classes," Gilbert said gruffly, "are they really open to everyone?" Every Tuesday and Thursday, I replied, even to people who once called it just dirt. Leo took the podium, beginning the ceremony. I stood between my sister and my old tormentors, watching as he unveiled the plaza's official name, Community Garden Transit Hub, where growth meets progress. You won, you know, Esther said softly. Not just the land or the money, you won something bigger. It was never about winning, I replied, my hands still dirty from planting. It was about growing something better from the ashes of what was destroyed. The ceremony continued around us. Paris interviewed excited community members. Children explored the new educational beds. Remington chatted with city officials about expanding the program to other stations. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Dorian. I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved better. I deleted it without responding. Some plants aren't meant to be revived. Ready to cut the ribbon? Leo called out. I stepped forward, taking the ceremonial scissors. The crowd gathered, cameras flashed, and somewhere in the back I saw Gilbert nod slightly. This garden, I announced, was never about revenge. It was about roots, the kind that run deeper than anger, stronger than spite, the kind that break through concrete and survive winter, the kind that feed communities, not egos. The ribbon fell away, and applause erupted. As people moved toward the refreshments, I knelt back down by my newly planted tomato. Need help with those other seedlings? Bethany asked, rolling up her sleeves. Always, I smiled, reaching for another plant. Behind us, Esther lingered. Could you show me how to plant one properly? I handed her a trowel and a heritage tomato seedling. First rule of gardening, you have to get your hands dirty. She knelt down beside me, this woman who had once mocked my muddy knees and pushed her manicured fingers into the soil. Sometimes revenge blooms into something unexpected. Sometimes it grows into forgiveness. And sometimes, in the rich soil of justice, it transforms into something that feeds not just the body, but the soul. I didn't rebuild what was lost. I planted something better.